When I first met Jessica, it was like the gods were screwing with me. One minute, I was some schmuck slaving away at the dealership, convincing middle-aged dudes that a sports car would cure their erectile dysfunction. And the next, there she was walking in with this smile that could outshine 1,000 headlights. She was all curves and charm, the kind of woman you'd risk your liver for, just to buy her another overpriced cocktail. We got married 2 years later. It wasn't perfect. Who the hell has a perfect marriage? But it worked. I mean, she tolerated my obsession with late-night poker games, and I only lightly judged her penchant for yoga classes named after wild animals. Downward dog, cobra flow, all things that sounded more like wrestling moves than relaxation techniques. But lately, things have been off. It was subtle at first, a shift in the wind. Jessica started taking longer to get ready, like we were living in some eternal prom night. Her phone had become an extension of her hand, as if she were texting secrets to the cosmos. At first, I chalked it up to work stress. She managed marketing at this eco-friendly cosmetics company. Lots of pressure to convince suburban moms that face cream made from hemp and unicorn tears would keep them young forever. Then came the first real clue. It wasn't one of those cliché lipstick-on-the-collar moments. No, Jessica was sneakier than that. I'd gotten up early for once, miracles do happen, and decided to make coffee mostly because I was too hungover to drive to Starbucks. I grabbed her travel mug and noticed something odd. The scent. It wasn't coffee anymore. It was chamomile tea. Jessica hateteo. Always said it tasted like boiled grass clippings. But here she was, filling her mug with the stuff like she'd just discovered some zen she'd never mentioned before. Weird, right? Then there was the hair clip. Simple, harmless. Except I found it under the passenger seat of her car, a seat I hadn't sat in for months. The clip was glittery, cheap, like something you'd win out of one of those claw machines at a mall arcade. It wasn't Jessica's style at all. She leaned more toward polished elegance, not junior high-fashion disasters. That night, I asked her about the clip. She barely blinked. Said it must have belonged to her coworker, Amanda. Apparently, Amanda had ridden with her to some meeting in the city last week. Fine, I thought, but something gnawed at me. Jessica was never this good at covering her tracks if she was covering tracks. She usually couldn't lie to save her life, which was oddly endearing. I tried to push it out of my mind. Maybe I was just being paranoid. Marriage isn't some fairy tale with singing mice and pumpkin carriages. It's messy, full of days where you'd rather nap than have sex, and where romantic dinner means heating up leftovers without burning the house down. Suspicion was just a side effect of the grind, right? Then she started coming home later and later. Always some excuse. Meetings, last-minute deadlines, yoga workshops. You wouldn't believe how intense cougar flow is, she'd say, flashing that disarming grin of hers. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But my gut was telling me otherwise, and my gut had never steered me wrong, except maybe that one time I trusted the street tacos from a gas station parking lot. The thing about Jessica is she's smarter than people give her credit for. She knows how to play the long game, how to plant enough half-truths that you start questioning your own reality. Gaslighting? Maybe. Or maybe I was losing it. One evening, I decided to test her. Told her I had to work late, even though I didn't. Instead, I parked a few blocks away from the house and waited like some B-movie detective. I half expected to feel ashamed, but mostly I felt justified. If she was lying, I needed to know. If she wasn't, well, I'd apologize with a weekend getaway and wine tasting. Hours passed. The streetlights flickered on, casting long shadows across the quiet cul-de-sac. Around 9:30, Jessica finally pulled up, alone. Relief washed over me for a second. Maybe I really was an idiot. But just as I was about to start the car and head home, I saw her do something that set off every alarm in my brain. She checked her reflection in the car window. Not a quick glance. She fixed her hair, reapplied lipstick, then gave herself a once-over like she was about to step onto a runway. Who the hell does that to come home to their husband? I sat there, numb, as she walked inside. Something was definitely going on, and I was going to find out exactly what. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, listening to Jessica's soft breathing next to me. She slept like a baby, peaceful and serene, while my mind spun like a hamster on meth. That image of her fixing her lipstick haunted me. Was it for some guy? Was she meeting someone when she said she was working late? Morning came, and I was no closer to answers. But I knew one thing for sure: I wasn't going to confront her just yet. No, I needed more evidence. If I went in half-cocked with suspicions and accusations, she'd twist it, make me feel like a paranoid lunatic. Women have that superpower, you know? Making you question your own damn thoughts. No, I needed to outsmart her. So, I played it cool. Real cool. I even made breakfast eggs, bacon, pancakes. The works. Jessica came downstairs, surprised to find me whistling over a sizzling pan like some Stepford husband. "Wow," she said, raising an eyebrow. "What's the occasion?" "No occasion," I said with a smile. "Just wanted to treat my gorgeous wife." "You deserve it." She gave me a soft kiss on the cheek, and for a moment, I almost forgot my mission. Almost. But then I noticed something, a faint whiff of cologne on her. And not mine. No, this was something else. Something musky and expensive. Jessica was allergic to most fragrances, said they gave her migraines. So, why was she suddenly wearing another man's cologne? My gut tightened, but I kept the smile plastered on my face. "You smell nice." New perfume. She hesitated for a split second. "Oh yeah, Amanda gave me a sample from the office. Some new unisex thing we're testing." Amanda again. Convenient. I decided to let it slide for now. Instead, I casually mentioned that I was thinking of taking a couple of days off work. "We could use a little getaway," I said. "What do you think? Maybe the coast?" Her reaction was subtle but telling. She froze for a moment, her fork halfway to her mouth, before quickly recovering. "That sounds great," she said, too enthusiastically. "But maybe next month? Things are crazy at work right now." "Of course. Work. The ultimate scapegoat." I just nodded and changed the subject, pretending to be satisfied. Inside, though, I was seething. Something was definitely up, and I was done playing dumb. That afternoon, I took the first real step toward the truth. I knew someone who could help my buddy Ray. Ray was a tech wizard, the kind of guy who could hack your toaster if he wanted to. He'd been my friend since high school, back when we'd bonded over our mutual hatred of algebra and love of terrible action movies. If anyone could help me uncover Jessica's secrets, it was him. We met at a dive bar on the edge of town. Ray was already there, nursing a beer and scrolling through his phone. He looked up as I approached, smirking. "Well, if it isn't Mr. Domestic Bliss. What's the emergency? Burn the toast again." "Shut up," I muttered, sliding into the booth across from him. "I need a favor." His smirk faded when he saw the seriousness in my eyes. "Okay, what's going on?" I hesitated for a moment, then spilled the whole story: the late nights, the tea, the hair clip, the cologne. Ray listened without interrupting, nodding thoughtfully as he sipped his beer. "Sounds like she's hiding something," he said when I finished. "Could be another guy. Could be something else. Either way, you're not crazy." "Thanks for the vote of confidence," I said dryly. "But I need proof. Real proof. And that's where you come in." Ray grinned. "Ah, you need me to go full James Bond, huh? What are we talking? Tracking her phone? Installing spyware? Planting a camera in her car?" "Whoa, slow down. 007, I said, laughing despite myself. I was thinking something a little more subtle. "Can you get me access to her texts and emails?" He nodded. "Yeah, I could set something up, but you know this could get messy, right? You find something you don't like, there's no going back." "I know," I said, my jaw tightening. "But I need the truth, Ray. I can't live like this." "All right," he said, finishing his beer. "I'll get you what you need. Just be ready for whatever you find. Sometimes the truth isn't worth it." Ray worked fast. Within 24 hours, I had access to Jessica's digital world. It felt weird at first, like spying on a stranger. But the more I read, the more things started to make sense. There were messages cryptic at first, but increasingly suspicious. A lot of them were from someone named K. No last name, no photo, just the initial. The messages were innocent enough on the surface. "Meeting confirmed. Usual spot. See you Thursday night. Can't wait." But there was an undertone, something unspoken between the lines. Something intimate. Thursday night. That was tonight. I closed the laptop, my mind racing. This was it, the moment of truth. I had a choice to make: confront her now or follow her and catch her in the act. Neither option was appealing, but I knew what I had to do. Tonight, I'd find out exactly who Kay was. And if my suspicions were right, Jessica was about to learn a hard lesson about screwing with the wrong husband. I spent the day pretending everything was normal. It wasn't easy. Every time I looked at Jessica, I felt like I was standing at the edge of a cliff, one push away from total disaster. But I kept my cool, even joking with her about the absurdity of her work. Apparently, her boss was obsessed with using avocado in every product. Avocado-infused eye cream. I teased. Next thing you know, they'll be selling guacamole for your face. She laughed, and for a moment, it was like old times. But beneath her laughter, I could see it's something guarded, something distant. It pissed me off more than anything. How long had she been hiding this from me? How long had I been playing the oblivious husband? By the time evening rolled around, I was ready. Jessica claimed she had another late meeting. You know how it is, she said, slipping on her coat. These clients don't understand boundaries. I'll probably be home late. Take your time, I said with a grin that was just shy of sinister. I'll probably crash early anyway. She kissed me on the cheek, an obligatory peck that felt more like a business transaction, and headed out the door. I watched her car disappear down the street before grabbing my keys. Showtime. I followed at a safe distance, staying just close enough to keep her taillights in sight. My hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles turning white. Part of me still hoped I was wrong, that this would all turn out to be some ridiculous misunderstanding. Maybe Kay was a harmless coworker, someone helping her land a big client. But I didn't believe that. Not anymore. Jessica drove across town, taking a few suspiciously indirect turns. Was she checking to see if anyone was following her? Clever, but not clever enough. Eventually, she pulled into a small parking lot behind a trendy little cafe. Not exactly the kind of place you'd expect for a clandestine affair, but maybe that was the point. Who'd suspect an affair over lattes and scones? I parked a block away and watched as she got out of the car. She was nervous, I could tell from the way she fidgeted with her purse strap. She glanced around quickly before heading inside. No sign of Kay yet. Perfect. I had time to get closer. The cafe was one of those hipster joints that smelled like lavender and existential dread. You know, the type exposed brick, Edison bulbs, and a barista with a neck tattoo that probably read something like Live Laugh Espresso. I slipped inside quietly, scanning the room. Jessica was seated at a corner table, facing the entrance. Her back was straight, her eyes darting toward the door every few seconds. She was waiting for someone. Him. I grabbed a newspaper, who knew they still existed, and took a seat where I could see her without being seen. Time ticked by painfully slow. Jessica ordered a tea, of course, and sipped it absent-mindedly. Just when I was starting to think I'd miscalculated, the door opened. In walked Kay. But this wasn't what I expected. Not even close. Kay was a woman. Tall, elegant, with striking dark hair and a smile that could disarm a bomb squad. She strode toward Jessica with an air of confidence that instantly made me hate her. Jessica's face lit up as she rose to greet her. They hugged, the kind of hug that wasn't just friendly, but full of unspoken history. I blinked, my brain struggling to process what I was seeing. This wasn't some sleazy affair with a dude named Kyle or Kevin. No, Jessica had been meeting up with a woman this whole time. A very attractive woman, mind you. What the actual hell? I leaned back, watching the scene unfold. They were talking quietly, leaning in close. Jessica looked more animated than I'd seen her in months, laughing, touching the woman's hand. My gut twisted in a way I couldn't explain. Was this an affair? Emotional? Physical? What the hell was I even dealing with here? The possibilities buzzed around my head like a swarm of angry hornets. I felt like someone had yanked the rug out from under me. For months, I'd been obsessing over some imaginary dude, thinking Jessica was sneaking around with the pool boy or whatever. But now this? My wife might be cheating on me with another woman? It was almost funny in a cruel, cosmic way. Almost. I pulled out my phone and took a few discreet photos. Evidence. Proof. I wasn't sure what I was going to do with it yet, but I knew I needed it. Maybe I'd confront her, maybe I wouldn't. Either way, this game was changing fast, and I needed to stay one step ahead. They stayed at the cafe for over an hour, talking and laughing like old friends or maybe something more. I couldn't hear their conversation, but I didn't need to. The body language said it all. Jessica was fully engaged, leaning forward, her eyes sparkling in a way I hadn't seen in ages. Meanwhile, I sat there in the shadows, feeling like an intruder in my own marriage. When they finally stood to leave, I made my move. I slipped out ahead of them and waited in my car. Jessica and the woman walked out together, sharing a final, lingering hug before parting ways. Jessica got back in her car and drove off, completely unaware of the storm brewing in my head. I followed her home, keeping a safe distance. The drive was quiet, but my mind was anything but. Questions ricocheted around my skull like bullets. Who was this woman? How long had this been going on? And most importantly, what the hell was I going to do about it? I sat in my car outside the house for a good 10 minutes after Jessica got home. The house lights blinked on one by one as she moved through the rooms, probably getting ready for bed like it was just another Thursday night. Like she hadn't just spent the last hour having an intimate coffee date with a woman who smelled like Chanel and confidence. My pulse thumped in my ears. I needed to think. I needed a plan. But nothing about this situation was normal. I'd prepared for an affair with some sleazy office dude. You know, the stereotypical midlife crisis. Fancy suit, leased sports car, and just enough charm to ruin a marriage. But this? My wife was cheating on me, or whatever this was, with a woman. And not just any woman. No, this K person was sophisticated in a way Jessica always admired, but never quite managed to embody herself. She was the kind of woman who probably meditated at sunrise and drank wine you couldn't pronounce. I bet she read poetry in her spare time. The type of woman Jessica secretly wanted to be. I could see it now. Maybe that was part of the attraction. But that still didn't explain why Jessica kept it all hidden. If it wasn't a full-blown affair, why not just tell me? Hell, I wasn't some insecure caveman. I could handle the fact that my wife had friends outside of me. Or could I? I sighed and finally forced myself out of the car. The cold air hit me like a slap. Time to put on the act again. Time to play the loving, clueless husband until I could figure out my next move. When I walked inside, Jessica was in the kitchen, sipping tea again with the tea. She looked up and smiled. Hey, you're still awake? Yeah, couldn't sleep, I said, shrugging off my jacket. I made my way to the fridge and grabbed a beer. My hand trembled slightly as I twisted off the cap. I took a long swig, trying to steady my nerves. How was your meeting? She hesitated just long enough for me to catch it. Oh, same old stuff, she said, waving it off like it was no big deal. Clients are driving me crazy. You wouldn't believe the last-minute changes they keep asking for. Sounds rough, I said, keeping my tone light. Maybe you should take a break soon. We could do that getaway after all. Maybe, she said, but I could tell she wasn't really considering it. She was already somewhere else, lost in her own thoughts. The tension in the room was suffocating. I needed to change the subject before I said something I couldn't take back. Hey, remember that time we tried to go camping and ended up at that sketchy motel with the raccoon in the lobby? She laughed, and for a moment, the tension broke. God, yes. You insisted that the place had character. Meanwhile, I was pretty sure it was a crime scene waiting to happen. Hey, it was either that or sleep in the car, I said, grinning. And you were the one who packed wine, but forgot a corkscrew. She rolled her eyes playfully. Details, details. We fell into an easy rhythm after that, reminiscing about old times. For a brief moment, it felt like we were us again. But underneath the laughter, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was living on borrowed time. Jessica had secrets that didn't include me. Later that night, after she'd fallen asleep, I sat on the edge of the bed, scrolling through the photos I'd taken at the cafe. There was Jessica, leaning in close to Kay, smiling like she didn't have a care in the world. I zoomed in on Kay's face, trying to commit every detail to memory. Who was she? What was her story? And why the hell was she so important to my wife? I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The next day, I called Ray. Yo, what's the status on that intel you pulled? I asked. Got everything you need, Ray said. Texts, emails, calendar appointments. I even found some social media profiles. Want me to send it over? Yeah, I said, my jaw tightening. Send it all. I've got some homework to do. By the time I finished combing through the files, I had a clearer picture. Kay's full name was Kate Morrell. She was an entrepreneur, owner of a boutique marketing agency that focused on female empowerment campaigns. She and Jessica had first crossed paths at a business conference last year. They kept in touch ever since, their messages becoming increasingly personal over time. There were no explicit declarations of love or lust, but the subtext was there. Late-night conversations about dreams and fears, compliments that went beyond the surface. And then there were the photos, group shots from networking events, selfies from fancy restaurants. Always smiling, always close. Too close. What hit me hardest, though, were the conversations about me. Jessica had vented about our marriage, how we'd grown distant, how I didn't understand her anymore. One message from Kate stood out. Maybe you just need to figure out who you really are. Sometimes relationships hold us back from becoming our true selves. I stared at the screen, my hands clenched into fists. This wasn't just some harmless friendship. This woman was worming her way into my wife's life, planting doubts, feeding insecurities. And Jessica was letting her. Fine. Two could play this game. I wasn't going to confront Jessica just yet. No, I had a better idea. If Kate wanted to insert herself into my marriage, I was going to insert myself right back into her world. And by the time I was done, neither of them would know what hit them. The next few days were a carefully orchestrated game of cat and mouse. Jessica continued her routine like nothing had changed: early mornings, long evenings, and the occasional cryptic phone call she made while pretending to fold laundry. Meanwhile, I was 2 steps ahead, piecing together a plan that would make both her and Kate regret underestimating me. First, I needed to understand Kate. If I was going to take her down, I had to know what made her tick. So, I started with her online presence. Her agency had a sleek website filled with buzzwords like authentic storytelling and empowerment through connection. Gag me. But what caught my attention was an upcoming event. She was hosting a networking soiree for like-minded, driven professionals at some swanky rooftop bar downtown. Perfect. The night of the event, I pulled out all the stops. New suit, sharp haircut, cologne that didn't scream desperation but hinted at I make good decisions. I needed to be someone Kate would notice, someone she'd want to talk to. The goal wasn't just to confront her, it was to infiltrate her world, plant seeds of chaos where she least expected them. I wasn't just going for revenge. I was going for psychological warfare. The rooftop bar was as pretentious as I'd imagined. String lights hung like constellations over a crowd of perfectly curated people sipping artisan cocktails with names like Elderflower Ambition. I scanned the room and spotted Kate near the edge of the terrace, holding court with a group of admirers. She was in her element, laughing, gesturing elegantly with a martini in hand. Showtime. I approached with casual confidence, catching her eye as I ordered a drink from the bartender. She gave me a polite smile, probably the same smile she'd used to disarm 1,000 other men, but I wasn't just any other man tonight. Networking events, I said, raising my glass in a mock toast, where people pretend to care about each other's success stories for 2 hours before hitting the buffet. She chuckled, tilting her head slightly. And yet here you are? What's your story? Just a guy looking to make connections, I said, holding her gaze. Thought I'd see what all the hype was about. Well, you've come to the right place, she said smoothly. Kate Morrell. She extended her hand, and I shook it, deliberately letting the moment linger just a fraction longer than necessary. Dan, I said, not offering a last name. I wasn't ready to play that card yet. So, Kate, tell me, what's the secret to building a successful empire like yours? She smiled again, this time with a touch more intrigue. And just like that, I was in. We spent the next hour talking well. Mostly me listening and Kate subtly flexing her accomplishments. She was clearly used to being the center of attention, but I made sure to steer the conversation just enough to keep her intrigued. I dropped a few hints about my business ventures and my interest in collaborative opportunities, letting her fill in the blanks with her imagination. By the time the night was winding down, she was hooked. I could see it in the way she leaned in, the way her eyes sparkled with curiosity. She wasn't just impressed, she was curious. And that was exactly what I needed. As the crowd began to thin out, I made my move. Listen, Kate, I said, setting my glass down. I've got an idea I think you'd be interested in. Why don't we meet sometime next week? Somewhere quieter, where we can really talk. She hesitated for a moment, then nodded. All right, give me your number, and I'll have my assistant set something up. Assistant. Of course. I gave her my number and watched as she typed it into her phone. Looking forward to it, I said with a smile that hinted at more than just business. As I walked away, I felt the rush of adrenaline kick in. The pieces were falling into place. Kate thought she'd just made a valuable new connection, but what she didn't know was that I was the connection she'd never see coming. Over the next few days, I kept the charade going. Kate texted me a few times, all business at first, but gradually the tone shifted. She was curious about me, asking subtle questions about my background and ambitions. I played the role perfectly, feeding her just enough information to keep her intrigued without giving away too much. Meanwhile, I kept a close eye on Jessica. She seemed oblivious to my activities, still wrapped up in whatever emotional escapade she had going on with Kate. But I noticed little things, her phone lighting up with texts she'd quickly swipe away, the way she'd smile to herself when she thought I wasn't looking. It was infuriating, but it also fueled my resolve. Then came the moment I'd been waiting for. Kate invited me to a private dinner, just the two of us. The restaurant was upscale but intimate, the kind of place where deals were sealed over $100 bottles of wine. I arrived early, wanted to get a feel for the setting. When Kate arrived, she was dressed to kill, sleek black dress, understated jewelry, the whole 9 yards. She greeted me with a warm smile and a kiss on the cheek. Glad you could make it, she said as we sat down. Wouldn't miss it, I replied smoothly. The tension between us was palpable, though I wasn't sure if it was purely professional or something else entirely. Either way, it didn't matter. Tonight, I was going to turn the tables. Dinner with Kate was a masterclass in subtle manipulation. We danced around each other with words, both pretending to be open while revealing only what suited our agendas. She talked about her business philosophy, empowerment, authenticity, all that self-help nonsense people buy into when they're trying to fill a void. I nodded along, sipping my wine and throwing in the occasional thoughtful question. Meanwhile, my mind was spinning with calculations. How far could I push this? How much would she reveal before realizing who I really was? So, Dan, she said, her eyes sparkling over the rim of her glass. What's your long-term vision? What gets you out of bed in the morning? I leaned back in my chair, pretending to ponder the question. Honestly, connections. Real ones. You meet so many people in life, and most of them are just noise, you know? But every now and then, you find someone who gets you. That's what I'm after. It wasn't a lie, not entirely. The irony wasn't lost on me, though. I was describing the very thing Jessica had apparently found in Kate. The difference was I wasn't looking for understanding, I was looking for leverage. Kate nodded thoughtfully. I can relate to that. People are drawn to authenticity, but it's so rare to find these days. Exactly, I said, holding her gaze. And when you do find it, you don't let it slip away. Her smile faltered for a split second, a crack in the armor. Good. I was getting to her. By the time dessert rolled around, the conversation had taken a more personal turn. Kate opened up about her past, how she'd built her business from the ground up after leaving a toxic relationship. She didn't go into details, but I caught the undertone of bitterness. Whoever the ex was, he'd clearly left a mark. I promised myself I'd never let anyone control my life again, she said quietly. I've worked too hard to let someone else dictate my happiness. I nodded, feigning empathy. It's empowering to take control, isn't it? But sometimes that control can slip away without us even realizing it. She tilted her head, curiosity flickering in her eyes. What do you mean? I leaned in slightly, lowering my voice. It's easy to get caught up in other people's needs, their expectations. Before you know it, you're compromising, sacrificing bits of yourself. It's subtle at first, but eventually you wake up and wonder how you got there. Kate seemed to be processing my words carefully. I could tell I'd hit a nerve. Maybe Jessica wasn't the only one dealing with doubts and insecurities. Sounds like you've experienced that yourself, she said softly. More than I'd like to admit, I replied. But I've learned a lot from it. I've learned that sometimes the only way to take back control is to surprise the people who think they know you best. She smiled, but there was a hint of something else beneath it. Suspicion? Intrigued? I couldn't tell, but it didn't matter. The seed had been planted. We wrapped up dinner shortly after, and as we walked out of the restaurant, Kate hesitated at the door. "This was nice," she said. "We should do it again sometime." I smiled. "Definitely. Maybe next time, I'll surprise you." "Surprises can be dangerous," she said with a playful smirk. "But I'm intrigued." "Good," I said, leaning in just enough to make her catch her breath. "A little intrigue keeps life interesting, don't you think?" She didn't reply right away, just studied me with those sharp, calculating eyes. I could tell she was trying to figure me out, to read between the lines. But I wasn't giving her any answers tonight. Let her stew in the mystery. It would keep her coming back for more. We parted ways after that, me heading to my car, her walking off into the night with an extra sway in her step. I watched her go for a moment, feeling a strange mixture of triumph and tension. I'd gotten under her skin, but this was only the beginning. The real game was still ahead. When I got home, Jessica was already in bed, her phone face down on the nightstand. I wondered if she'd been texting Kate earlier, maybe even talking about me without realizing I was the new wild card in their game. The thought fueled my determination. I wasn't just going to expose this tangled mess. I was going to control it. I'd make both of them regret underestimating me. Sliding into bed, I stared at the ceiling, my mind racing. I was walking a tightrope now, balancing on the edge of revenge and discovery. One wrong move could unravel everything. But if I played it right, this would be a masterpiece of chaos. The next morning, I woke early, not because of some newfound motivation, but because I couldn't turn off my brain. I lay in bed for a while, watching Jessica as she slept. She looked peaceful, like someone with no secrets, no guilt. It was almost impressive how easily she compartmentalized everything. I wondered if Kate had that same talent if she woke up in her designer sheets feeling untouchable, unburdened by the lives she was disrupting. No more waiting. It was time to escalate. I started by digging deeper into Kate's world. Ray had already given me plenty of access to Jessica's texts and emails, but now I needed more direct information on Kate herself. A quick search through some business directories confirmed my suspicions. Kate's agency was on shaky financial ground. On the surface, it looked successful, flashy marketing, high-profile clients, but underneath, it was a house of cards. Overextended on loans, late payments to vendors, shrinking revenue. This was my end. By mid-afternoon, I had set up a meeting with an old client from my car dealership days, a sleazeball named Gavin who now worked in venture capital. Gavin owed me a favor after I'd sold him a Jaguar at a friends and family discount. Read, I didn't report half the commission. He specialized in swooping in on struggling businesses, offering lifelines that were really traps. If anyone could exploit Kate's vulnerability, it was him. "Dan, my man," Gavin said, grinning like the shark he was as we sat down in his office. "Long time no see. What brings you to my neck of the woods?" "I need a favor," I said, cutting straight to the point. "There's a marketing agency that's ripe for a takeover. I want you to make them an offer they can't refuse, but one that comes with strings attached." His eyes lit up. "Now you're talking my language. Give me the details." That evening, I played the part of the perfect husband. Jessica and I had dinner together, takeout sushi, and a bottle of wine she picked up on her way home. We chatted about mundane things, work, the neighbor's ugly Christmas lights still being up in February, a mutual friend's divorce. She seemed relaxed, even happy, which only made my resentment simmer beneath the surface. She had no idea that the foundation of her little secret life was already starting to crack. "So, I was thinking," I said, pouring her another glass of wine. "Maybe we should take that weekend trip after all. Get away from all the work stress." She hesitated just for a moment. "That sounds nice," she said, though there was something distracted in her voice. "Maybe next month?" "Sure," I said, pretending not to notice. "Whenever you're ready." In my mind, I was already a step ahead. Next month? By then, her entire world would be upside down. The next day, Gavin texted me. The deal was in motion. He'd approached Kate's agency with a lucrative investment offer, one that looked like a lifeline on paper, but came with terms that would gradually erode her control over the company. If she accepted, she'd be on a financial leash. If she refused, her agency would be left struggling to survive. Now all I had to do was wait. Patience isn't exactly my strong suit, but this time, I relished the anticipation. I wanted Kate to feel the pressure, to scramble for solutions without knowing the real cause of her problems. And Jessica? Well, she'd be caught in the fallout soon enough. Later that week, I got an unexpected curveball. Kate called me directly. "Dan," she said, her voice smooth but slightly tense. "I was hoping we could meet again. Something's come up, and I'd like your perspective." "Of course," I said, keeping my tone casual. "When and where?" We arranged to meet at a quiet lounge downtown. I could hear the strain in her voice. Something had shaken her confidence. Perfect. When I arrived, she was already there, nursing a cocktail and scrolling through her phone. She looked up as I approached, and for the first time, I saw cracks in her polished exterior. "Hey," I said, taking a seat. "Rough week." "You could say that," she replied, forcing a smile. "Business is complicated right now." "Complicated how?" She hesitated, then sighed. "I've been approached by an investor. The offer looks good on the surface, but something feels off. I can't shake the feeling that there's more to it than they're letting on." "Trust your gut," I said, leaning forward. "If it feels wrong, there's probably a reason." She nodded, her eyes searching mine. "It's hard to know who to trust sometimes. People have agendas." "You have no idea," I thought, but I kept my expression neutral. "Look," I continued, "you've built something incredible. Don't let anyone take that away from you. You've got options. You just need to be smart about who you partner with." For a moment, she seemed genuinely grateful. I almost felt a pang of guilt, but only almost. She and Jessica had made their choices. Now, they'd have to live with the consequences. As the night wound down, Kate seemed to relax a bit. We chatted about lighter topics, and for a while, it almost felt normal. But beneath the surface, the game continued. Every word, every gesture was part of the chess match. When we parted ways, she thanked me for listening. "You're different," she said softly. "Most people only care about what they can get from you. But you seem real." I smiled, though inside I was laughing. "I try," I said. "See you soon, Kate." As I walked away, I could feel her eyes on me. The trap was set. All I had to do now was wait for her to take the bait. The days that followed were a whirlwind of manipulation, tension, and subtle power plays. Kate's agency was officially in crisis mode. Gavin reported back that she had rejected his offer at first, but the pressure was mounting. Vendors were threatening to pull contracts, unpaid invoices were piling up, and whispers of instability were circulating among her clients. She was scrambling, and I could practically feel her desperation through the cryptic texts she sent me. Jessica, meanwhile, was completely in the dark. She probably sensed that Kate was stressed, but she didn't know why. I wondered if Kate had confided in her, or if she was too proud to admit what was happening. Either way, it was only a matter of time before their little fantasy world started to crumble. One night, after Jessica had gone to bed, I sat on the back porch with a whiskey in hand, letting the cool night air clear my head. I had accomplished a lot already. Kate's business was on the verge of collapse, and Jessica's perfect image of her was about to shatter. But something still gnawed at me, a question I couldn't shake. Why? Why had Jessica done this? Was it really just about finding emotional connection with someone who understood her? Or was there something deeper, something I had missed in our marriage, in the quiet moments between arguments and routines? I hated that I still cared enough to wonder. Hated that I wasn't satisfied with just revenge. I downed the rest of the whiskey and pushed the thought aside. Answers could wait. I wasn't done yet. The next day, Kate texted me, asking if I had time to meet. She didn't say it outright, but I could tell she was close to breaking. I agreed to meet her at a park near her office, neutral ground. She probably wanted advice, someone to vent to. Perfect. I wanted to be the voice in her ear when she finally fell apart. When I arrived, she was sitting on a bench, looking out over the pond. She didn't see me at first. Her shoulders were tense, her face drawn. I almost felt bad for her. Almost. "Hey," I said, approaching with a casual smile. "You all right?" She looked up, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Done? Thanks for coming." I sat down beside her. "You sounded like you could use a friend." She sighed heavily, running a hand through her hair. "It's been a nightmare. Everything's falling apart, and I don't know who to trust anymore. People I thought were loyal are jumping ship. I'm starting to feel like I've built my whole life on quicksand. Sometimes you have to let things fall apart to rebuild them stronger, I said, playing the role of the supportive confidant. You can't control everything, Kate, but you can control how you respond. She nodded slowly, her gaze distant. You're right. I've worked so hard to get here. I can't lose it all now. You won't, I said gently. You're too smart and too driven to let that happen. You'll find a way. For a moment, she looked at me with something that bordered on vulnerability. I don't know why, but I feel like I can trust you. I forced myself to hold her gaze, to keep the mask in place. Because I'm on your side. She smiled faintly, but I could see the doubt still lingering in her eyes. Good. Let her doubt. Let her wonder. The meeting ended with a promise to stay in touch, but I knew the clock was ticking. Kate was spiraling, and Jessica would feel the aftershocks soon enough. That evening, I got another text, this time from Jessica herself. Can we talk? It read. Simple, direct, and ominous. I stared at the screen for a moment, my mind racing. Did she know something? Had Kate finally broken and told her about the business troubles, or worse, about me? Sure, I replied. What's on your mind? We sat down in the living room after dinner. Jessica looked nervous, fidgeting with the hem of her sweater. I leaned back in my chair, keeping my expression neutral. So, I said, breaking the silence. What's up? She hesitated, then took a deep breath. I feel like we've been drifting apart lately. Oh, this conversation. Classic. Okay, I said slowly. And what makes you feel that way? I don't know, she said, shrugging. I guess it's just everything. Work, stress, routines. We've both been so busy. I miss how things used to be. How things used to be, I echoed, my voice tightening. When, exactly? When you were sneaking around behind my back. Her eyes widened. What are you talking about? You know exactly what I'm talking about, Jessica, I said, my tone sharp now. Don't play dumb. I've seen the texts. I know about Kate. She paled. You've been spying on me? Don't act like the victim here, I snapped. You've been lying to me for months. Meeting up with her, hiding things. And now you want to talk about how we've been drifting apart? She opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. For the first time in a long time, she looked truly speechless. Good. Here's the thing, Jess. I continued, my voice cold. You think you found someone who gets you. Someone who's going to fill all those empty spaces inside. But guess what? She's not perfect. She's falling apart right now. And you have no idea. Jessica's eyes filled with confusion and fear. Well, what are you talking about? You'll find out soon enough, I said, standing up. You wanted to talk? Well, now you've got plenty to think about. I walked out, leaving her sitting there in stunned silence. The game was in full swing now, and I wasn't going to stop until both of them were drowning in the consequences of their choices. The next few days were like watching a house of cards collapse in slow motion. Jessica and I barely spoke. She walked around in a daze, no doubt trying to piece together how much I knew and how I'd found out. I gave her nothing, no explanations, no reassurances. Just silence. Let her stew. Let her feel the weight of every lie she'd told. Meanwhile, Kate was in full damage control mode. Gavin sent me updates like he was giving play-by-play commentary. She was scrambling to save her agency, making desperate calls to investors and clients, but no one was biting. The financial noose was tightening, and I could almost hear it choking her from across town. Then came the explosion I'd been waiting for. It started with a text from Jessica, short and frantic. We need to talk. Now. I ignored it. I wasn't going to make this easy for her. A couple of hours later, she came home early from work. I was in the garage, tinkering with some old tools I didn't actually need to fix. She found me there, looking more frazzled than I'd ever seen her. Dan, we need to talk, she said, her voice tight. I wiped my hands on a rag, taking my sweet time before turning to face her. Oh, about what? Kate, she said, crossing her arms. Something's happening to her business. She's falling apart. And I think you know something about it. I raised an eyebrow. Why would I know anything about that? Don't play games with me, she snapped. Did you do something to her? I chuckled darkly. Do something to her? No. I didn't do anything to Kate that she didn't do to herself. Jessica's face twisted in frustration. Dan, this isn't just about her. It's about us. I don't even know who you are anymore. That's funny, I said, stepping closer. I was thinking the same thing about you. You've been sneaking around with her, lying to me for months. And now you want to stand here and act like I'm the problem? I didn't cheat on you, she shot back. It wasn't like that. Then what was it? I demanded. Explain it to me, Jess. Tell me how having secret dates and late-night texts with another woman isn't betrayal. She hesitated, tears welling in her eyes. I don't know. It just happened. I was lonely, and she made me feel seen. But it was never physical. I swear. Lonely, I repeated, shaking my head. You were lonely, so instead of talking to me, you found someone else to see you. Do you even hear yourself right now? I'm sorry, she whispered. I made a mistake, but I didn't want to hurt you. Too late for that, I said coldly. You already did. Later that night, Jessica retreated to the bedroom, probably crying herself to sleep. I stayed on the couch, staring at the ceiling, letting the storm inside me rage quietly. I had finally confronted her, finally laid everything bare. And yet, it didn't feel like the victory I'd imagined. Sure, I had the upper hand, but what now? Was this the end of us? Did I even want it to be? Part of me still burned with the desire for revenge, but another part, the part that had once loved her deeply, was tired. Tired of the games, the lies, the endless cycle of hurt. I had shattered her world and Kate's. Now I was left standing in the ruins, wondering if I'd destroyed more than I'd intended. The next day, Kate reached out to me. She sounded desperate, asking if I could meet her to talk things through. I agreed, curious to see how far she'd fallen. We met at the same cafe where I'd first followed Jessica. This time, Kate looked haggard, her perfect exterior crumbling under the weight of her failing business. I don't know what's happening, she said, her voice trembling slightly. Everything is going wrong all at once. It's like someone's sabotaging me. Maybe it's karma, I said casually, taking a sip of coffee. She frowned. What do you mean? I leaned forward, locking eyes with her. Kate, you've been playing with fire. You've inserted yourself into other people's lives, manipulated their emotions, and now you're surprised that things are falling apart. Her expression darkened. Are you blaming me for what's happening? I'm saying actions have consequences, I said evenly. You might want to start thinking about who you've hurt along the way. She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see the wheels turning in her mind. Maybe she was starting to connect the dots. Maybe she suspected I wasn't just some random business contact anymore. Either way, it didn't matter. I made my point. Good luck, Kate, I said, standing up. You're going to need it. That was the last time I saw her. A week later, I heard through the grapevine that her agency had been acquired in a hostile takeover. She'd been forced to step down as CEO. Jessica didn't say much about it, but I knew it weighed heavily on her. The dream she'd built with Kate had crumbled, and there was no going back. As for us, we weren't magically healed overnight. There were still long, painful conversations ahead, but something had shifted. Jessica was really trying to reconnect with me. And for the first time in a long while, I felt like maybe there was a path forward. It wouldn't be easy, and I wasn't sure if I could ever fully trust her again. But at least now, we were facing the truth. Sometimes revenge isn't about destruction. Sometimes it's about making people see what they've lost and letting them live with the consequences.